The morning of December 16th, 1944, near Rocherath, Belgium, a Sherman tank from the 2nd Armoured Division sat hull down behind a snow-covered embankment, its 76mm gun trained on the tree line 400 yards distant. Through the early morning fog, the crew heard them before they saw them. The distinctive rumble of Maybach engines, the grinding of overlapping road wheels on frozen ground. Then, emerging from the mist like apparitions from German propaganda, the silhouettes, Tiger tanks, 4 of them, moving in a column toward American positions with the confidence of predators that had never met an equal. Staff Sergeant James Bates, commanding the Sherman, knew what his intelligence briefings had told him. Tiger frontal armor, 100mm thick, impenetrable to his gun. German doctrine assumed complete invulnerability. His orders were clear. Let them pass. Call in artillery. Wait for tank destroyers with 90mm guns. Do not engage directly. Do not throw away your tank and crew in a futile gesture. Bates did not follow those orders. At 600 yards, he gave the command to fire. His gunner, Corporal Thomas Rivera, aimed not at the lead Tiger's glacis plate, where armour was thickest, but at the upper hull side, where the 80mm plate met the sponson, visible as the Tiger angled slightly to navigate the terrain. The shell, an M79 armour-piercing round, left the barrel at 2,600 feet per second. 2 seconds later, it punched completely through the Tiger's side armour, detonated the ammunition storage, and sent the turret careening off the chassis in a spectacular eruption of flame and smoke. The German crew never had time to react. Their 60-ton fortress, their supposed technological superiority, their propaganda-fed certainty of invincibility, all incinerated in an instant by a weapon German intelligence had dismissed as inadequate. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The remaining 3 Tigers scattered immediately, abandoning their column formation, seeking cover behind the tree line. German crews radioed frantic warnings that contradicted everything they had been taught. American Shermans, mounting 76mm guns, could penetrate Tiger armour. At combat ranges, from angles German doctrine had assumed were safe, the revelation sent shockwaves through German armoured units across the Western Front. For 2 years, Tiger crews had operated with psychological invincibility. They knew American 75mm Shermans could not harm them frontally. Intelligence reports confirmed that even the upgraded 76mm gun lacked adequate penetration against Tiger protection. German tankers had been trained, indoctrinated, psychologically conditioned to believe their armour made them untouchable by American medium tanks. That certainty died in Belgium during the winter of 1944. And the story of how American guns that supposedly could not penetrate Tiger armour systematically destroyed Tigers throughout the Ardennes offensive reveals a profound truth about armoured warfare. Specifications written on paper matter far less than tactical reality on the battlefield. The Tiger I heavy tank entered combat in August 1942 on the Eastern Front near Leningrad. Its development had been accelerated by German encounters with heavily armoured French and British tanks during the 1940 campaign that had revealed critical gaps in German anti-tank capabilities. The result was a 60-ton behemoth designed to dominate any battlefield through sheer firepower and protection. Frontal armour of 100mm, mounted vertically on the hull, provided protection that no Allied tank gun in service during 1942 could penetrate at combat ranges. The gun, mantlet, variably thick but averaging 110mm at its thickest point, created an essentially impenetrable frontal aspect. Side armour of 80mm on the upper hull and 82mm on the turret sides represented protection levels exceeding most tanks' frontal armour. The main armament, the 88mm Ku K-36 gun, derived from the legendary 88mm flak gun that had terrorised Allied armour in North Africa. This weapon, with a barrel length of 56 calibers, achieved a muzzle velocity of 2,650 feet per second with armour-piercing ammunition. At 1,000 yards, it could penetrate 120mm of armour, sufficient to destroy any Allied tank from any angle. The psychological impact of the Tiger exceeded its material capabilities. German propaganda celebrated the Tiger as proof of Aryan technical superiority, a weapon that would restore German dominance and repel Allied advances. Each Tiger battalion received extensive publicity. Newsreels showed Tigers crushing Soviet tanks. Radio broadcasts described them as invincible. Frontline infantry reported that the mere rumor of Tigers in an area caused Soviet forces to retreat. This reputation transferred to the Western Front when Tigers deployed to counter the Normandy invasion. American tank crews had heard the stories. They knew the specifications. Intelligence reports confirmed that the 75mm M3 gun, equipping most Shermans, could not penetrate Tiger frontal armor at any range. Even side shots required close quarters, within 100 meters, to guarantee penetration through the 80mm plate. American armor doctrine adapted accordingly. Standard tactics for encountering Tigers involved one Sherman section drawing fire, while another section maneuvered to flank positions for side or rear shots. The assumption was absolute. Tigers were invulnerable frontally to Sherman guns. Period. This assumption was based on sound engineering analysis and German specifications that American ordnance had captured and verified. A Tiger's frontal armor could defeat 75mm armor-piercing rounds at all practical combat ranges. The math was indisputable. 100mm of hardened steel could not be penetrated by projectiles with insufficient kinetic energy. What American intelligence did not initially understand was that Tiger armor protection varied dramatically by angle and by specific plate. The frontal glacis, 100mm thick and vertical, was indeed impenetrable to 75mm guns, but the driver's plate, also 100mm thick, had different hardness characteristics. The side hull plates, while 80mm thick, were vertical, not sloped, and vulnerable from any angle that allowed a shot. More critically, Tigers in combat rarely presented perfect head-on aspects. Terrain, tactical, movement, turret traverse to engage multiple targets. All these factors meant Tigers constantly exposed angles where armor protection decreased dramatically. German doctrine trained Tiger crews to maintain frontal orientation toward threats, but combat chaos made this impossible to sustain. The American 76mm M1 gun that began reaching Sherman units during mid-1944 represented a significant improvement in anti-armor capability. Development had begun in 1942, driven by anticipation that German armor would improve throughout the war. The gun fired a 76mm projectile at 2,600 feet per second, providing penetration of approximately 109mm against vertical armor at 1,000 yards, with the M79 armor-piercing capped round. This was still insufficient to penetrate Tiger frontal armor reliably. American ordnance testing confirmed that the 76mm gun could not defeat a Tiger's frontal glacis at any combat range. The driver's plate might be vulnerable at close ranges, below 600 meters, depending on ammunition type and impact angle. The gun mantlet was essentially impenetrable. These test results, conducted under laboratory conditions against fixed targets at perfect 90-degree impact angles, shaped American tactical doctrine. The 76mm Sherman was an improvement, certainly, better than the 75mm gun, but still inadequate for frontal engagements with Tigers. American tank crews received briefings explaining these limitations. They were told explicitly that frontal engagements with Tigers remained suicidal even with the upgraded gun. What the testing did not capture was battlefield reality. Tigers in combat did not present perfect 90-degree frontal aspects on level ground at predetermined ranges. They maneuvered, they turned their turrets, they navigated terrain that required angle changes. Every deviation from perfect frontal orientation created vulnerability. At 10 degrees off perfect frontal alignment, the effective thickness of vertical armor decreases slightly. At 20 degrees, vulnerability increases substantially. At 30 degrees, even the frontal plates become penetrable by guns that theoretically lack sufficient power. And the side armor, that 80 to 82 mm plate that German doctrine assumed was protected by maintaining frontal orientation, became completely vulnerable whenever terrain or tactical necessity forced Tigers to expose their flanks. American crews discovered these vulnerabilities through combat experience, not through laboratory testing. The first lesson came from British forces, equipped with 17-pounder anti-tank guns. British tests against captured Tigers demonstrated that side armor could be penetrated at remarkably long ranges when the Tiger presented even modest angles. American intelligence received these reports, but initially assumed they applied only to the more powerful British gun. The second lesson came from actual combat encounters in France during August and September 1944. American tank destroyer units equipped with 3-inch guns reported successful penetrations of Tiger side armor at ranges exceeding 800 yards when Tigers maneuvered to engage multiple targets. These reports reached Army-level intelligence but were classified as tactical information specific to tank destroyers, not applicable to medium tanks with less powerful guns. The third and most critical lesson emerged during the Battle of the Bulge, when German forces committed 3 Tiger battalions, 501 SS Heavy Panzer Battalion, 502 SS Heavy Panzer Battalion, and Army Heavy Panzer Battalion 506 to the offensive. These units reported over 500 tank kills during the first 2 weeks of fighting, but they also reported something German intelligence found deeply disturbing: Tiger losses to 76mm Sherman guns, not from flank ambushes at close range, which doctrine anticipated, but from frontal aspect engagements at ranges between 400 and 800 yards, ranges where German specifications insisted Tigers were invulnerable, ranges where American guns theoretically lacked penetration capability. The contradiction between theoretical protection and actual combat results created confusion that rippled through German armored doctrine. German engineers examined damaged Tigers returned from the Ardennes. They found penetrations through side armor at angles that should have provided adequate protection. They found penetrations through frontal plates at ranges where American guns supposedly lacked power. They found evidence that contradicted their laboratory testing and their carefully calculated specifications. The explanation lay in a convergence of factors that laboratory testing had not replicated. First, American ammunition performed better in combat than predicted by laboratory tests. The M79 armor-piercing capped round used a ballistic cap that improved penetration against face-hardened armor. German test plates were rolled homogeneous armor, not the face-hardened plate actually used in Tiger construction. This difference meant real Tiger armor was more brittle, more prone to cracking and spalling, less effective at stopping projectiles than test plates suggested. Second, American crews aimed for specific weak points that testing had not emphasized. The junction between hull and turret, where welds created stress concentrations, the driver's vision port, where the armor plate was thinner, the turret ring, where mechanical clearances required gaps in protection. Laboratory testing shot at the center mass of armor plates. Combat shooting targeted the edges, the joints, the transitions where armor protection was compromised by mechanical necessity. Third, combat ranges were shorter than doctrinal planning assumed. German doctrine anticipated tank engagements at 1,000 to 1,500 meters, ranges where Tiger guns dominated and Tiger armor was most effective. The terrain in Belgium's Ardennes region, with its forests, hills, and villages, forced engagements at 300 to 800 yards. At these closer ranges, even guns with marginal penetration capability could defeat armor by striking at optimal angles. Fourth, and most significantly, Tigers in combat could not maintain ideal defensive positions. German offensive doctrine required Tigers to advance, to maneuver, to expose their flanks while engaging multiple targets. Every tactical movement created angles where 80mm side armor became vulnerable to American guns firing from concealed positions. American crews learned to wait, to let Tigers advance past their positions, to shoot for the sides rather than attempting impossible frontal shots. The tactical solution American crews developed was simple, but required discipline that contradicted every instinct. Do not shoot at Tigers from the front, even with the 76mm gun. Do not try to penetrate the frontal armor. Instead, maneuver to create side shots. Use terrain for concealment. Let the Tiger pass. Shoot for the side hull plate above the tracks. Aim for the flat vertical plate that German doctrine assumed was protected by maintaining frontal orientation to threats. This tactic worked because Tigers could not maintain frontal orientation in all directions simultaneously. A Tiger engaging targets to its front was vulnerable to flanking fire. A Tiger turning its turret to engage a flanking threat exposed its side to other American tanks. A Tiger reversing to escape from a flanked position exposed its rear armor, only 80mm thick, vulnerable to even 75mm guns at moderate ranges. The Battle of Rocherath-Krinkolt during December 17 through 19, 1944, provided the most dramatic demonstration of these tactics. The 2nd and 99th Infantry Divisions, supported by scattered tank and tank destroyer units, faced assaults by the 1st SS Panzer Division Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler, which included Tiger elements from 501 SS Heavy Panzer Battalion. The terrain around Rocherath was heavily forested, cut by narrow roads, dotted with stone buildings that channeled German armor into predictable approach routes. American tank destroyers and Shermans established defensive positions in the village, using buildings for cover, positioned to fire down the streets where Tigers would be forced to advance. The first Tiger attacks came on the morning of December 17th. German tactics were doctrinally correct. Tigers led the advance, confident their armor would protect them. Supporting Panther and Panzer IV tanks followed. Infantry advanced alongside to suppress American anti-tank guns. The lead Tiger, advancing down the main street of Rocherath, took 3 hits from 76mm guns before its crew realized they were under fire. The first shot, from a Sherman positioned in a building basement, struck the Tiger's right side at an angle as the Tiger turned to navigate a street corner. Penetration. Ammunition fire. The Tiger burned immediately. The second Tiger, advancing 50 meters behind the first, attempted to reverse when it saw the lead tank destroyed. This exposed the vertical rear plate, 80mm thick. A second Sherman, positioned in a barn on the opposite side of the street, fired from a range of 200 yards. Complete penetration. The crew evacuated, but 3 men died before reaching cover. The third and fourth Tigers in the column attempted to suppress the American positions with main gunfire while reversing to escape the kill zone. Both took hits to their side armor as they maneuvered. One was destroyed immediately. The other was immobilized, with damaged running gear but remained combat-capable, firing at American positions for 3 hours until finally destroyed by repeated hits that eventually penetrated the frontal armor through cumulative damage to the same impact point. 501 SS Heavy Panzer Battalion reported 6 Tigers destroyed at Rocherath on December 17th. All 6 were penetrated by 76mm Sherman guns at ranges between 200 and 600 yards. All penetrations were through side or rear armor. Not a single Tiger was lost to frontal penetration, which remained as impossible in combat as specifications predicted. But the side armor, that 80mm plate German doctrine assumed was protected, proved completely vulnerable when Tigers maneuvered in confined terrain. German after-action reports from Rocherath expressed confusion and frustration. Tiger commanders had followed doctrine. They maintained frontal orientation to known threats. They used their firepower advantage to suppress American positions. They advanced with infantry support. Yet they lost Tigers to guns that specifications said were inadequate. The disconnect between theoretical protection and actual combat results undermined German confidence in their supposed technical superiority. American commanders drew different conclusions. The 76mm gun could defeat Tigers. Not frontally, not at long range, but under realistic combat conditions where Tigers had to maneuver and expose their flanks. The key was tactical patience. Don't seek frontal engagements. Create situations where Tigers must expose their sides. Use terrain to force Tigers into confined spaces where maneuver is restricted. The M93 high-velocity armor-piercing ammunition, universally known as HVAP, represented an attempt to solve the penetration problem through advanced ammunition rather than larger guns. HVAP rounds used a tungsten carbide core surrounded by a lightweight aluminum body, providing significantly higher muzzle velocity. The 76mm M93 round achieved 3,400 feet per second, compared to 2,600 feet per second for standard ammunition. This higher velocity translated to dramatically improved penetration against vertical armor. At 100 yards, the M93 could penetrate 201 millimeters of rolled homogeneous armor at 90 degrees. At 500 yards, penetration remained approximately 157 millimeters. These figures exceeded Tiger frontal armor specifications, suggesting that HVAP ammunition could defeat Tigers frontally at combat ranges. The reality proved more complex. HVAP rounds performed exceptionally well against vertical, homogeneous armor under laboratory conditions. Against face-hardened armor, which Tigers used, performance decreased substantially. Against sloped armor, which Panthers used, performance decreased even more dramatically. The tungsten core, being relatively small and pointed, was prone to shattering against hard, sloped surfaces, rather than penetrating cleanly. More critically, HVAP ammunition was desperately scarce. Tungsten carbide was a strategic material required for numerous wartime industrial purposes. Machine tool bits, armor-piercing ammunition across all calibers, specialized alloys for aircraft engines, all competed for limited tungsten supplies. Production of 76mm HVAP rounds began in July 1944, but ramped up slowly. Initial production was 1,000 rounds, sent by air to Europe for testing. The Isigny tests, conducted in France during July 1944, evaluated HVAP performance against captured German armor. Results were promising against vertical plates, but disappointing against sloped armor. HVAP could penetrate Tiger side armor at extended ranges, confirming the tactical value of flanking shots, but it could not reliably penetrate Panther frontal armor even at close range, limiting its effectiveness against Germany's most numerous heavy tank. Production targets for HVAP ammunition were repeatedly revised downward as tungsten shortages intensified. The initial goal of 43,000 rounds per month for the remainder of 1944 was abandoned. A more modest target of 10,000 rounds per month was not achieved until November 1944. Through the critical months of August through October, when American forces were fighting across France and approaching the German border, HVAP production averaged fewer than 2,000 rounds per month. Distribution prioritized tank destroyer units equipped with 3-inch or 76mm guns. Sherman tanks mounting 76mm guns received HVAP ammunition in small quantities, typically 5 to 10 rounds per tank, intended for emergency use against heavily armored targets. Many Sherman units received no HVAP ammunition until after the Battle of the Bulge commenced in December 1944. This scarcity meant American tank crews could not rely on HVAP as their primary anti-Tiger solution. Standard armor-piercing ammunition remained the norm. The tactical approach developed through combat experience, flanking shots against side armor rather than frontal penetration attempts, remained essential regardless of ammunition availability. The 644th Tank Destroyer Battalion, equipped with M10 tank destroyers mounting 3-inch guns, provided the most detailed documentation of HVAP use during the Battle of the Bulge. The battalion's after-action report listed every German armoured vehicle destroyed during December 17 through 19 at Rocherath-Krinkelt, including ammunition types used and hit locations. Of 30 Panthers and Panzer IVs destroyed, 19 were credited to 3-inch gunfire. 7 were destroyed using HVAP ammunition, all from side or rear shots at ranges between 300 and 800 yards. 12 were destroyed using standard armor-piercing ammunition, also from side or rear aspects. Not a single Panther was destroyed by frontal penetration using any ammunition type. The report noted that HVAP's primary value was extending the range at which side armor could be reliably penetrated, not enabling frontal engagements. American intelligence officers analyzing these reports reached conclusions that contradicted earlier assumptions about Tiger invulnerability. Tigers could be defeated by 76mm guns, using standard ammunition when proper tactics were employed. HVAP ammunition improved effectiveness, but was not essential. The key factors were tactical positioning, patience to wait for proper shot opportunities, and crew training emphasizing precision shooting at specific armor weak points. German intelligence reached different conclusions that were equally significant. American tank crews were becoming more skilled at exploiting Tiger vulnerabilities. American tactics emphasized flanking maneuvers that German doctrine had not adequately addressed. American ammunition was performing better than German testing had predicted. The psychological impact of Tiger invincibility was being systematically dismantled by combat experience that contradicted propaganda claims. The 501st SS Heavy Panzer Battalion reported a particularly disturbing incident on December 18th. A single platoon of 3 Tigers, advancing to support infantry assault near Bühlingen, was engaged by 4 American Shermans from concealed positions. The Tigers attempted to suppress the American position with main gunfire while maintaining frontal orientation. 2 of the Shermans were destroyed immediately. The remaining 2 Shermans held position, not attempting frontal shots, waiting for the Tigers to maneuver. When the Tigers advanced toward the suppressed American position, they passed a stone barn that concealed one of the surviving PERT, Shermans. As the Tigers moved past, the Sherman fired 3 times in 6 seconds, 3 side armor penetrations at 200 yards. All 3 Tigers destroyed. The engagement lasted less than 30 seconds from first shot to final destruction. The German after-action report noted with something approaching disbelief that American crews had willingly sacrificed 2 tanks to create the opportunity for the successful ambush. This tactical discipline, this willingness to trade casualties for proper shot opportunities, represented a level of sophistication German intelligence had not credited to American forces. Early American encounters with Tigers had been characterized by panic and disorganized retreat. By December 1944, American crews were executing complex tactical maneuvers that exploited Tiger vulnerabilities with ruthless efficiency. The cumulative impact of these tactical developments shaped the outcome of the Ardennes offensive. German Tiger battalions began the Corps offensive with high operational readiness rates and experienced crews. 501st SS Heavy Panzer Battalion started December 16 with 55 Tigers. 502 SS Heavy Panzer Battalion had 38 Tigers. Army Heavy Panzer Battalion 506 had 42 Tigers. Total operational strength, 135 Tigers, the largest concentration committed to any single operation since Kursk. By December 26, when German offensive momentum had clearly stalled, the 3 battalions reported combined operational strength of 78 Tigers. 57 Tigers lost in 10 days. Not to overwhelming American numerical superiority, though that certainly contributed. Not to American air power, which was grounded by weather for most of the period. Not to 90mm guns on M36 tank destroyers, though those weapons certainly inflicted casualties. Substantial Tiger losses came from 76mm Sherman guns exploiting tactical vulnerabilities that laboratory testing had not anticipated and that German doctrine had inadequately addressed. The gap between theoretical specifications and battlefield reality. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. The specific ammunition that proved most devastating to Tigers during the Ardennes offensive was not the scarce HVAP round, but the standard M79 armor-piercing capped projectile that equipped every 76mm Sherman. This round, developed in 1943 and standardized for production in 1944, incorporated a ballistic cap that improved performance against face-hardened armor compared to earlier solid-shot designs. The M79 weighed 15 pounds and contained 1.6 pounds of explosive filler. This explosive charge, detonating after penetration, created catastrophic damage inside target vehicles. German crews who survived M79 penetrations reported that the internal explosion typically ignited ammunition immediately giving crew members only seconds to evacuate before the entire vehicle was consumed by fire. The ballistic cap on the M79 served multiple functions. First, it improved aerodynamics, maintaining velocity over distance better than uncapped projectiles. Second, it protected the armor-piercing cap beneath it during flight and initial impact. Third, and most critically, it caused the projectile to bite into face-hardened armor rather than shattering on impact, a problem that had plagued earlier American ammunition designs. British testing in 1943 had revealed a phenomenon called the shatter gap, where armor-piercing projectiles impacting face-hardened armor at certain velocities would shatter rather than penetrate, even when their theoretical penetration capability exceeded the armor thickness. This occurred because the projectile nose was too soft relative to the hardened armor surface. At very close ranges, where impact velocity was extremely high, projectiles would punch through before shattering. At longer ranges, where velocity had decreased substantially, projectiles would penetrate without shattering. But at intermediate ranges, typically between 50 and 900 meters for 76mm guns, projectiles would shatter on impact and fail to penetrate. American ordnance engineers had modified the M79 design to minimize this effect. The armor-piercing cap beneath the ballistic cap was heat-treated to optimal hardness, approximately 260 to 300 Brinell hardness number. This hardness level provided the best compromise between penetration capability and resistance to shattering. Testing confirmed that the M79 exhibited less shatter gap effect than earlier ammunition designs, particularly against Tiger armor, which used face-hardened plate on frontal surfaces. German metallurgical testing of captured American ammunition revealed these improvements. German engineers noted that American projectiles were optimized for penetrating face-hardened armor rather than rolled homogeneous armor. This represented sound engineering based on correct intelligence about German armor types. American ordnance had done its homework. The ammunition was designed specifically to defeat the armor protection actually used in German tanks, not theoretical armor that existed only in laboratory testing. The Tiger's 80mm side hull plate represented the critical vulnerability that American tactics exploited. This plate was vertical, not sloped, meaning its effective thickness was simply its actual thickness, regardless of impact angle. It was rolled homogeneous armor rather than face-hardened plate, making it more ductile but less resistant to penetration. And it was positioned exactly where American flanking tactics would create shot opportunities. At 600 yards, an M79 round striking Tiger side armor at 90 degrees would penetrate with substantial energy remaining. The projectile would pass completely through the 80mm plate, cross the interior crew compartment, potentially penetrate internal components, and detonate when its fuse functioned. The explosion inside a confined space packed with ammunition, fuel, and crew members was invariably catastrophic. At 800 yards, penetration became less certain but remained possible. The projectile would penetrate the plate but with less residual energy, potentially stopping inside the vehicle or passing through with minimal energy. Even these marginal penetrations often proved lethal. The explosive filler would detonate inside the hull, creating overpressure that killed or incapacitated crew members. Shrapnel from the projectile and armor fragments would ricochet inside the crew compartment. Ammunition would ignite. The Tiger would be destroyed, even though the penetration was technically marginal. German crews learned to fear these side hits more than frontal hits that failed to penetrate. A frontal hit that bounced off or shattered against face-hardened armor was psychologically disturbing but physically harmless. The crew could continue fighting. The Tiger could maneuver and return fire. But a side hit, even from a supposedly inadequate gun at extended range, meant almost certain destruction. There was no surviving a penetration through side armor that detonated ammunition storage. The tactical implications forced changes to German armored doctrine in the middle of ongoing operations. Tiger commanders received revised instructions emphasizing defensive positioning that protected side armor, even at the cost of offensive momentum. This directly contradicted the offensive mission Tigers had been committed to accomplish. The Ardennes offensive required aggressive forward movement, but aggressive movement exposed flanks to American tanks that had learned exactly where and how to shoot. The contradiction between operational requirements and tactical survival created paralysis in German decision-making. Tiger commanders hesitated to advance into terrain where American tanks might be concealed in flanking positions. This hesitation surrendered initiative to American forces and slowed German advances. But aggressive advancement without flank security meant accepting Tiger losses that German industry could not replace. By late December 1944, German Tiger production had ceased entirely. The final Tiger I rolled off the assembly line in August 1944, replaced in production by the Tiger II. Existing Tigers could not be replaced. Every loss was permanent. This reality forced Tiger commanders into defensive caution that undermined their offensive mission. American forces, by contrast, operated with the certainty that lost Shermans would be replaced within days or weeks. Damaged tanks evacuated to maintenance depots would be repaired and returned to action. Completely destroyed tanks would be replaced by new production arriving from the United States. This knowledge allowed American crews to accept tactical risks that German crews could not. The willingness to trade 2 Shermans to create ambush opportunities for the remaining 2, as documented at Bullingen, reflected this operational reality. American doctrine accepted trading favorable loss ratios for mission accomplishment. German doctrine, constrained by irreplaceable equipment losses, could not afford similar trades even when tactically advantageous. The psychological impact on German Tiger crews was documented in captured diaries and post-war interviews. Crews who had started the war, believing in Tiger invincibility, found themselves operating increasingly cautiously, as combat demonstrated that invincibility was myth rather than reality. The knowledge that American 76mm guns could kill Tigers under the right circumstances created stress that affected crew performance. German tankers described constantly scanning for flanking threats rather than focusing on frontal targets. They reported hesitation to advance aggressively for fear of ambush. They noted that the psychological advantage Tigers had enjoyed earlier in the war had evaporated by late 1944. American crews no longer retreated in panic at the sight of Tigers. Instead, they maneuvered deliberately to create killing opportunities. This psychological shift mattered as much as the material capability to penetrate Tiger armor. Early in the war, Tiger reputation caused American units to withdraw from defensive positions, even when those positions provided tactical advantages. By the Battle of the Bulge, American units held positions and fought Tigers with weapons doctrine claimed were inadequate. The change was not in equipment capability, which had improved only modestly. The change was in tactical understanding and crew confidence. Training programs evolved to reflect combat lessons. American replacement crews arriving in Europe during late 1944 received instruction emphasizing Tiger vulnerabilities rather than Tiger invincibility. They learned the locations of weak points. They practiced identifying angles that exposed side armor. They drilled on the patience required to wait for proper shot opportunities rather than taking futile frontal shots. German training programs could not adapt similarly because German tactical doctrine remained committed to the offensive. Tiger crews could not be trained in defensive tactics that contradicted their operational mission. The doctrinal inflexibility that had served Germany well during mobile warfare phases of the conflict became a liability during the defensive phase that characterized late 1944 and early 1945. The specific engagement at Rocherath on December 18th, documented in unusual detail by both American and German sources, illustrates these tactical and psychological factors converging. 3 Tigers from 501st SS Heavy Panzer Battalion advanced down a narrow street lined with stone buildings. American forces had withdrawn from the street the previous day after the first Tiger attacks, suggesting the position was untenable. The German Tiger commander, Hauptsturmführer Ernst Bachmann, an experienced tanker with multiple combat deployments, followed doctrine precisely. He maintained frontal orientation down the street. His 2 wingmen covered flanks as much as confined terrain permitted. Infantry advanced alongside to suppress anti-tank positions. The approach was textbook German armoured tactics as taught at training schools. What Bachmann did not know was that American forces had deliberately withdrawn to create the appearance of a cleared route. 2 Shermans from the 2nd Armored Division remained concealed in buildings on opposite sides of the street, positioned 300 yards apart. 2 additional Shermans occupied positions at the far end of the street, visible to the advancing Tigers, positioned to draw fire and attention. When the lead Tiger reached the midpoint between the concealed Shermans, both fired simultaneously. Neither aimed for frontal armor. Both targeted the side hull plate above the tracks, where 80 millimeters of vertical armor provided the only protection. Both M79 rounds penetrated. The Tiger's ammunition detonated immediately. The explosion was violent enough to blow the turret completely off the chassis. The second Tiger, 50 meters behind the leader, immediately traversed its turret to engage the Sherman that had fired from the left side of the street. This maneuver exposed the Tiger's right side to the Sherman concealed on the right side of the street. A second penetration through side armor, a second ammunition detonation, a second catastrophic kill. The third Tiger attempted to reverse rapidly while firing at both concealed Sherman positions. The reverse maneuver exposed the rear hull plate, 80 millimeters thick and vertical. Both Shermans fired. 1 round struck the engine deck and penetrated into the engine compartment, starting a fire. The second round struck the rear hull plate, penetrated, and detonated inside. The crew evacuated successfully, but the Tiger burned. 3 Tigers destroyed in approximately 20 seconds. Total American losses, 0. The engagement demonstrated perfect execution of tactics developed through hard combat experience. American crews had positioned themselves to exploit Tiger vulnerabilities. They had maintained fire discipline, not shooting at impossible frontal armor. They had coordinated their ambush to engage multiple targets simultaneously, preventing Tigers from concentrating defensive fire. Bachmann survived the engagement because his tank was the leader and died before he could dismount. His after-action report never existed, but the battalion operations officer, who witnessed the engagement from a following position, filed a detailed report expressing shock at how efficiently American forces had destroyed 3 Tigers with weapons supposed to be inadequate for the task. The report noted specifically that American crews had not attempted frontal penetrations. This observation suggested American forces understood Tiger armor better than earlier engagements had indicated. The report recommended revised tactics, emphasizing never advancing through terrain where flanking positions might be concealed, but acknowledged this restriction would make offensive operations virtually impossible in the heavily forested Ardennes terrain. 501st SS Heavy Panzer Battalion lost 23 Tigers during the Ardennes offensive. Detailed loss reports exist for 17 of these. 11 were penetrated by 76 mm guns through side or rear armor. 4 were destroyed by 90 mm guns from M36 tank destroyers. 2 were penetrated by British 17-pounder guns from Sherman Fireflies attached to American units. Not a single Tiger in the battalion was destroyed by frontal penetration of the glacis plate, confirming that German specifications regarding frontal armor protection were accurate. But the specification that mattered was not frontal protection, it was side protection. And 80 millimeters of vertical armor, while impressive by mid-war standards, was completely inadequate against 76 mm guns at combat ranges below 1,000 yards. German doctrine had assumed Tigers would maintain frontal orientation to threats. Combat reality demonstrated this assumption was impossible to maintain in fluid combat conditions. The American M36 Jackson tank destroyer, mounting the 90 mm gun, provided additional anti-Tiger capability, but arrived in limited numbers during the Ardennes offensive. The 90 mm M3 gun could penetrate Tiger frontal armor at ranges exceeding 1,000 yards using standard ammunition, and well beyond 2,000 yards using HVAP ammunition. This capability made the M36 the most effective American anti-Tiger weapon in terms of pure penetration performance. But production of the M36 had only begun in June 1944, and initial deliveries to Europe came during the autumn. By December 1944, only approximately 200 M36s were operational in the European theatre. These were distributed among tank destroyer battalions, providing approximately 1 battalion per corps with the new vehicle. Most tank destroyer units still operated M10 Wolverines with 3-inch guns, and many remained equipped with M18 Hellcats with 76mm guns. The scarcity of M36s meant that American armor doctrine could not rely on them as the primary anti-Tiger solution. Sherman tanks would inevitably encounter Tigers without immediate tank destroyer support. The 76mm Sherman had to be capable of dealing with Tigers using its own main armament and crew skill. The tactical developments during the Ardennes offensive confirmed that this was possible when proper tactics were employed. German intelligence officers analyzing American tactics during the Ardennes offensive filed reports expressing concern about American improvement rates. Early 1944 engagements had shown American tank crews panicking when facing Tigers. Late 1944 engagements showed American crews executing complex ambushes that exploited Tiger vulnerabilities with ruthless efficiency. The learning curve was steep, and the implications were disturbing. If American forces continued improving tactically at observed rates, German armor advantages would become meaningless. Superior specifications would not compensate for inferior tactical execution. Heavier armor would not protect against shots taken from optimal angles by patient, skilled crews. German technological superiority, the foundation of propaganda that sustained home front morale, was being systematically dismantled by American practical competence. The broader strategic implications extended beyond individual tank engagements. Germany had invested enormous industrial resources in producing small numbers of sophisticated heavy tanks. The Tiger I program produced approximately 1,350 vehicles total. Production required specialized tooling, skilled labor, and exotic materials that were increasingly scarce as Allied bombing degraded German industrial capacity. The United States had invested industrial resources in producing vast numbers of adequate medium tanks. The Sherman program produced 49,324 vehicles total. Production used standard automotive manufacturing techniques, semi-skilled labor, and common materials available from domestic sources. The industrial philosophy was fundamentally different, reflecting different strategic assumptions and different operational doctrines. German doctrine assumed that superior individual vehicles would compensate for numerical inferiority. A Tiger, invulnerable to enemy fire and capable of destroying multiple enemy tanks per engagement, justified its high production cost. This assumption worked during 1942 and 1943, when Allied armor was genuinely incapable of defeating Tigers, except through overwhelming numbers and accepting heavy casualties. By late 1944, the assumption was failing. Tigers were not invulnerable. They could be defeated by properly applied tactics using weapons American industry could produce in vast quantities. The production cost of a single Tiger could have purchased approximately 2 Shermans with enough industrial capacity remaining to produce supporting vehicles, spare parts, and ammunition. The mathematical inevitability became apparent when analyzed from an industrial warfare perspective. Germany produced 1,350 Tigers over approximately 2 years. The United States produced 49,000 Shermans over approximately 3 years. Even if Tigers achieved 5-to-1 kill ratios, which combat records suggest they did not, the numerical disparity meant Tigers would be overwhelmed eventually. But the actual kill ratios were nothing like 5-to-1. Careful analysis of combat records from the Ardennes offensive suggests Tigers achieved approximately 1.5-to-1 kill ratios against Sherman units. For every Tiger destroyed, approximately 1.5 Shermans were lost. This ratio, while favoring Tigers, was completely inadequate to offset the massive numerical advantage American production provided. The tactical lesson was that specifications mattered less than availability. A Tiger with 100mm of frontal armor and an 88mm gun was theoretically superior to a Sherman with 76mm of frontal armor and a 76mm gun. But if the Tiger was in a maintenance depot awaiting parts while the Sherman was on the battlefield shooting at German forces, the Sherman was infinitely more valuable, regardless of specifications. Tiger operational readiness rates during the Ardennes offensive averaged approximately 71%. This was exceptional by German standards, achieved through extensive pre-offensive preparation and stockpiling of spare parts. Sherman operational readiness rates during the same period averaged approximately 75%, achieved through robust supply chains, simplified maintenance procedures, and abundant replacement parts. The 4 percentage point difference seems trivial, but multiplied across thousands of vehicles produced a substantial advantage. An American armored division with 300 authorized tanks could typically field 225 operational vehicles. A German panzer division with 200 authorized tanks could typically field 140 operational vehicles. The availability differential compounded the production differential to create overwhelming battlefield superiority. German crews understood this reality even when their commanders denied it. Diary entries from captured German tankers during the Ardennes offensive express frustration with equipment that worked magnificently when operational, but spent too much time awaiting repair. They noted enviously that American tanks seemed to be constantly available, always present, never absent for maintenance at critical moments. The psychological burden of operating irreplaceable equipment in deteriorating strategic circumstances affected German crew performance. Tigers represented Germany's most sophisticated military technology. Losing one meant losing production capacity that could not be replaced. This knowledge created caution that undermined aggressive tactics. Tiger commanders who should have pressed attacks hesitated because losing their vehicle meant permanent reduction in unit capability. American crews operated with opposite psychology. Losing a Sherman meant waiting for a replacement that would arrive within days. This knowledge enabled aggressive tactics that accepted calculated risks. Sherman commanders could press attacks knowing that even if their vehicle was destroyed, the unit would be reconstituted quickly and sent back into combat. The Battle of the Bulge ultimately demonstrated that specifications written on paper mattered far less than tactical reality on the battlefield. Tiger armor that was theoretically impenetrable was penetrated routinely by tactics that exploited unavoidable vulnerabilities. Tiger firepower that was theoretically overwhelming was negated by American forces that refused to present the frontal targets where that firepower was most effective. German crews who survived the Ardennes offensive and later encounters with 76mm Shermans carried knowledge that contradicted everything German propaganda had told them. American tanks were not inferior. American crews were not incompetent. American tactics were not unsophisticated. The comfortable certainties that had sustained German morale during earlier phases of the war dissolved when confronted with combat reality. The specific date when German tankers stopped believing in Tiger invulnerability cannot be precisely identified. But captured documents and post-war interviews suggest late December 1944 was the psychological turning point. After the Ardennes offensive stalled and German forces withdrew, leaving dozens of destroyed Tigers behind, the myth died. Tigers remained dangerous, but not invincible. American guns remained less powerful than German guns, but not inadequate. The final months of the war in Europe saw Tigers employed increasingly, defensively, positioned to protect flanks, avoiding offensive operations that would expose vulnerabilities. This defensive posture represented complete abandonment of the operational doctrine Tigers had been designed to execute. They had become defensive strongpoints rather than offensive breakthrough weapons, which was an admission that the original design assumptions had failed. American intelligence summaries from early 1945 noted this defensive shift and attributed it to German recognition that Tigers could not survive offensive operations against American forces that had learned to exploit their vulnerabilities. The summaries recommended continued emphasis on flanking tactics and side armor shots, noting that these approaches had proven effective across multiple engagements and diverse terrain conditions. Training manuals updated in March 1945 incorporated lessons learned from the Ardennes offensive. The manuals explicitly stated that 76mm guns could defeat Tiger armor when proper tactics were employed. They provided diagrams showing optimal aim points on Tiger side armor. They emphasized the importance of patience and discipline in waiting for proper shot opportunities rather than taking futile frontal shots. These updated manuals represented formal codification of knowledge American crews had developed through combat experience. The knowledge that German crews never expected 76mm Shermans to penetrate Tiger armor at 800 yards had become American institutional knowledge that would shape armor doctrine for decades. The post-war analysis conducted by American and British intelligence officers included extensive interviews with German Tiger crews. The interviews revealed a consistent pattern. German crews had entered combat confident in Tiger invulnerability based on specifications and propaganda. They lost that confidence through repeated encounters where Tigers were destroyed by weapons doctrine claimed were inadequate. By war's end, German crews feared American tanks not because of superior specifications, but because of superior tactics and overwhelming numbers. One German Tiger commander interviewed in 1946 expressed the psychological shift clearly. "We were told the Tiger was invincible. We believed it. The armor was thicker than anything the Americans had. The gun was more powerful. Every specification favored us. But specifications did not matter when American shells hit our sides. They penetrated. Our ammunition exploded. Our crews died. The specifications said it should not be possible. But it happened again and again until we stopped believing the specifications and started fearing every American tank we encountered." This psychological transformation from certainty to fear occurred because combat reality contradicted theoretical specifications. German engineers had designed Tiger armor to defeat American guns based on laboratory testing against frontal aspects at long ranges. Combat occurred at close ranges, from multiple angles in terrain that prevented maintaining ideal defensive positions. The gap between design assumptions and operational reality created vulnerabilities that American forces learned to exploit. The Tiger's 80mm side armor, while impressive by early war standards, was inadequate for late-war combat conditions. German doctrine that assumed frontal orientation could be maintained proved impossible to execute in fluid combat. American tactics that emphasized patience, positioning, and precise shooting at specific weak points proved devastatingly effective against vehicles designed to be invulnerable. The broader lesson extended beyond World War II to shape post-war armor development. American designers recognized that armor protection that was vulnerable from any angle was inadequate, regardless of how impressive frontal protection appeared on paper. Soviet designers, analyzing German heavy tank failures, reached similar conclusions. Post-war tank development emphasized all-around protection rather than concentrated frontal armor. The M48 Patton tank, entering American service in 1952, incorporated lessons learned from examining Tiger vulnerabilities. Side armor was increased to resist medium anti-tank guns at combat ranges. Turret armor was more evenly distributed. The design philosophy emphasized survivability from multiple angles rather than maximum frontal protection at the expense of side vulnerability. Soviet tank development followed similar patterns. The T-54 and T-55 series featured heavily sloped armor all around, eliminating the distinct frontal and side armor thickness differentials that had characterized earlier designs. The principle was that a tank must be capable of surviving hits from any angle, not just frontal aspects that tactical conditions might make impossible to maintain. These design philosophies emerged directly from combat analysis of Tiger performance against American forces. The Tiger had demonstrated that concentrated frontal protection was insufficient when tactical reality forced exposure of weaker side armor. Future designs would avoid creating similar vulnerabilities, even if that meant accepting somewhat less impressive frontal protection. The psychological impact on German forces of losing their technological certainty influenced post-war German military thinking profoundly. The Bundeswehr, established in 1955, developed armor doctrine emphasizing combined arms cooperation and tactical flexibility, rather than relying on technical superiority of individual platforms. The lessons learned when Tigers proved vulnerable, despite superior specifications, shaped institutional thinking for generations. American military culture absorbed different lessons that reinforced existing doctrinal preferences. Technical adequacy, combined with numerical superiority and tactical competence, could defeat technically superior but numerically inferior forces. This principle, validated by Sherman performance against Tigers, became foundational to Cold War American military planning. The specific engagements in Belgium during December 1944, where 76mm Shermans destroyed Tigers at ranges and angles, German doctrine insisted were impossible, represented the collision between theoretical specifications and battlefield reality. The specifications were accurate in isolation. Tiger frontal armor could indeed resist 76mm shells, but isolation was not combat reality. Combat required maneuvering, exposing flanks, navigating terrain, engaging multiple targets simultaneously. Every tactical necessity created vulnerabilities that careful study and laboratory testing had not anticipated. German crews who operated Tigers during the final months of the war knew truths that contradicted official propaganda. They knew American guns could kill Tigers. They knew American tactics exploited Tiger vulnerabilities systematically. They knew the supposed invincibility was myth rather than reality. This knowledge undermined morale in ways that went beyond individual equipment losses to affect confidence in German military competence generally. The myth of Tiger invulnerability had served German propaganda purposes well during 1942 and 1943. By 1945, that myth was dead, killed by combat experience that proved specifications written on paper could not overcome tactical reality on the battlefield. The crews who discovered this truth the hard way paid with their lives. The crews who survived carried knowledge that would shape military thinking for decades. The 76mm Sherman should not have been able to penetrate Tiger armor at 800 yards according to specifications and laboratory testing. But it did so repeatedly throughout the Ardennes offensive because combat reality was more complex than laboratory testing could capture. The lesson was that adequacy sustained over time defeats superiority that cannot be maintained. American industrial pragmatism that produced vast numbers of adequate tanks triumphed over German engineering perfectionism that produced small numbers of supposedly invincible tanks. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now and don't forget to subscribe.